95.9 KTIL, and thank you for tuning into the morning show with us, hanging out. It was a good one. 9:31 is the time at the moment here, and time to wrap up the morning show, move on into Tillamook today. I know you've been excited. We've been looking forward to this ever since she visited with Mark Labhart. How are we today, Shayna?
Well, we're not visiting with Mark Labhart this morning, but we are visiting with our state senator, Betsy Johnson. And Betsy, thank you for joining us today. You had a schedule change last Monday.
I did, and I think it's something that will be of considerable interest. But first, let me thank Mark Labhart publicly. That guy has saved me with your show a couple of times when I've had last-minute schedule kerfuffles. And Mark is so flexible and so thoughtful and so accommodating. And so you got Mark on Monday while I was over in Eastern Oregon. And let me just quickly tell you what it was we were up to. Mm-hmm. Senator Bruce Starr and I share adjoining districts. He represents Hillsborough and much of Washington County up in the Hillsborough area, Forest Grove up in that area. Our districts adjoin each other. And while we do not wear the same political jersey, Bruce and I get along splendidly. I think he's a fine legislator and he's a good friend. And so we had been talking about ways that we might help spread some of the benefit that is inuring to Washington County by virtue of the heavy investment that Intel has made in Washington County. Yes. How could we distribute some of that benefit around to the rest of the state? Yeah. The Intel is in Washington County by their own admission, and they told us this on Tuesday because I had 2 days of legislative exchange. The Intel made the investment that they made in Washington County taking part in a program called the Strategic Investment Program.
Right.
And this is a tax abatement program that calculates the wages and the number of jobs and then returns money both to the state and to the county that's thrown off by the income taxes generated by the jobs. And that's a very simplified version. But in Intel's situation, when they came and built the first phase, they created so many more jobs at so much higher a pay rate that Washington County is ending up getting a magnificent amount of money. And so Bruce Starr and I thought, from the state, what if we did a legislative exchange? We took some Washington County legislators over to Eastern Oregon, and we brought some Eastern Oregon legislators back to Washington County. And we began to understand each other a little bit better because there is a group of people in the legislature that think that this program has been successful, and so they want to kill it. That makes no sense to me at all. The argument is, gee, it was more successful than the model had indicated that it would be. It's going to cost the state a bunch of money, and we need to kill the program. And so Bruce Starr and I wanted to demonstrate to Washington County legislators and Washington County leaders that there are projects over in Eastern Oregon, far Eastern Oregon, that for a de minimis amount of money could create more jobs in that part of Oregon. And why didn't we take some of the money from Washington County, if Washington County leadership was willing to give up a little of it, and take some of the state share of this SIP, the Strategic Investment Program, and fund some of these projects in Eastern Oregon. So we got up in the morning and we went to Ontario. Ontario is a really long ways away from
Aren't you
Washington.
Sitting on the eastern border practically?
Yes, it is. It is in a different time zone. And I tease the representative down there. The representative who represents that area is Cliff Bentz, and he's one of the finest members of the legislature. And so we got to Ontario, and we got on buses, and we drove out an hour and a half out into a place called Juntura, which is in between Vail and Burns. And we saw a mine that is operating in diatomaceous earth. And diatomaceous earth is used for a variety of things like filtration of food products, and cat litter, and blood plasma is filtered through highly refined diatomaceous earth. And they would put on another shift if they had 6 miles of very bad rural road just paved. It doesn't have to be brought up to any glorious standard, just paved.
Interesting.
And so we went out and looked at the mine. Then we came back and we went up to Hermiston. And in Hermiston, we saw one of the really fascinating projects, which is a water right distribution and water sequestration program that a group working out there has negotiated with Water Resources, with the tribes. I just can't give enough credit to the young man who has helped pull this thing together. His name is J.R. Cook. And J.R. was able to share with us a plan that for $11 million investment in this water project that they have, we could take ground that produces about $100 an acre in crops, and when you irrigate it, it goes up to between $5,000 and $7,500 an acre in crops, high-value crops. And we would be able to do a demonstration project right in the heart of their water sequestration initiative and demonstrate its efficacy for $11 million. The money that's going to be flowing into Washington County, we've already made a $12 million payment, a $37 or $34 million payment. It's going to go up into the 80s and 90s here very shortly, and as Intel just announced, and the Washington County Board of Commissioners and the City Council of Hillsborough just ratified night before last or last night an extension of this strategic investment program. Money is going to pour into Washington County.
Right.
And so we're trying to make the case that we should share some. And then last but not least, we went over to Pendleton, and we saw one of the 3 sites that have been designated by the FAA as part of the Pan-Pacific Test Range for unmanned aerial vehicles. The FAA has given Oregon a virtual monopoly on helping to integrate unmanned aerial vehicles into our national airspace system. And why this is relevant to Tillamook is that one of those sites is Tillamook and is Near Space Corporation. And all 3 of the sites, the site in Tillamook, the site in Warm Springs, and the site in Tillamook, all need infrastructure. And so we visited the Pendleton site, and I have to remind my colleagues who are very enthusiastic about the Pendleton site that the other 2 legs on that stool are Tillamook and the tribes.
Right.
And so that was the tour. Extremely beneficial. And then we brought we brought East Oregon legislators over to Washington County on Tuesday, and we did a tour of Intel. A remarkable operation. Just there's 17,500 Oregonians that derive their jobs from Intel.
And I know an electrician who's doing some work over there, journeyman electrician, actually traveling from the Bay City area to a job for Intel.
They had a workforce, just the trades, of about 8,000, between 6,000 and 8,000 when they were building the fabs.
Well, I'll tell you something, Betsy. When we constantly say in this county, how do you get things done? It's by working together. I would hope that this state feels the same way, that here is a Washington County doing well, all of this stuff happening at Intel. How do we make the state healthy? We work together, and doing something over on our eastern side just makes sense. Good job.
Well, that was why I wasn't around on Monday, and I know that Mark is an East Oregon boy, born and bred over there. So I think that he would appreciate that he was facilitating me heading to Ontario while your show was on, so that we could hopefully begin to spread the gospel of, if the water in the harbor floats, if the water in the harbor rises, all the boats float. And we can't have just some of Oregon's boats floating. We got to have all of Oregon's boats floating. And so it was a long 2 days, but I think we made enormous inroads into telling the story of why we need to be generous and ecumenical as we spread the benefit of having Intel here. Intel is not just the purview of Washington County. All of Oregon is blessed that they're here, and we need to make sure that generates into projects on the ground.
We've seen big changes. I mean, look what else we've got. Nike is in Washington County. It's pretty impressive. Betsy, we're going to take a short break for a great sponsor. We're going to be right back. We're visiting with our state senator, Betsy Johnson, but Tillamook Bay Community College is currently accepting applications for 2 scholarships available for the 2014-15 school year. The first is a $1,500 Kiwanis Club of Tillamook Lyle Speck Memorial Scholarship. It's for tuition and is divided among fall, winter, and spring term. You must be in your 2nd year of a degree or certificate program at TBCC to qualify. Other requirements in an application can be found on the college's website or picked up in the main lobby. The second is a $1,200 Casey Green Endowed Scholarship. This one is for a single parent who's also working while attending school and goes toward tuition fees, textbooks, supplies, and or childcare, divided among fall, winter, and spring term. Again, both scholarship applications can be found on the TVCC website, tillamookbaycc.edu. Registration for fall term began on Monday, my goodness, August 25th, and classes are starting September 29th. And also new this fall is the Associate of Applied Science in Agriculture and Natural Resources degree program. It's going to prepare students for entry into a variety of career opportunities in agriculture, natural resources, forestry, fish and wildlife, food science, and other fields. And we're sure lucky to have that community college. That natural resources program, Betsy, is straight because we are now have our own accreditation. We are accredited, so we can come up with this program that benefits, it makes sense for our area. Not that PCC wasn't a great umbrella to be under, but it's nice to be on our own.
It is remarkable how transformational the presence of a community college is. I've been trying to get PCC, Portland Community College, to fulfill a promise to Columbia County and come out and put a physical presence in the Scappoose area, and God, it's gone slow. But the other thing I want to point out is the service organizations like Kiwanis that makes those scholarships possible.
Absolutely.
I know so many people, Chris, Barb Trout, people that work like dogs to make sure that the service organizations help provide a pathway to education. And I think it's easy to take some of those service organizations for granted right up until you hear them offering scholarships that could be life-changing for the beneficiaries.
Exactly. And Betsy, we were back visiting with our state senator, Betsy Johnson. Betsy, when Mark was on Monday, and I have to admit he told me to settle down a little bit, I was getting a bit upset. But this time, not just with FEMA, even though when I hear that, it kind of touches the things off, but it was more with our national marine fisheries. And I don't feel so sorry for the coho anymore. In my mind, if I can catch something and eat it, it's probably not endangered.
Well, I'm surprised that you didn't have to get a fire extinguisher to put out the county commissioners. They have every reason, as all of us that have the privilege of representing Tillamook County, they have every reason to be angry. This is a disconnected federal government, far distant from the real people on the ground, and the effect of the decisions that they are rendering that ostensibly will wipe out value for many people, will make it impossible to grow and develop Tillamook County. And it's not just Tillamook County, it's anybody in the floodplain, in a floodplain. It's a big chunk of Klamath County, for example. I was in a meeting at the Coastal Economic Summit on August 20th and 21st that was attended by our entire congressional, well, not our entire, but a big chunk of our congressional delegation. And I was actually supposed to go have a visit with Kurt Schrader, and Mark said, this is so important. Can we have the time that you've got with Congressman Schrader, and can we sit down and visit directly with him? And Mark pulled together a meeting that had Wyden staff, Merkley staff, Congressman Schrader himself, his staff, Senator Whitsitt from down in Klamath Falls to help drive home the point that this is an Oregon problem, not just a coastal counties, although because so many of the rivers drain down towards the ocean, the coastal counties are hit harder. But we have got to stop this, and we need our governor to help us. We need his natural resource staff to be fully engaged. The consequences of these decisions that are made at a great distance are just catastrophic. And whether they're the great distance between Salem and Tillamook and their dumb decisions that the Division of State Lands makes, or they are at the distance of Oregon and Washington, D.C., the dumb decisions that NOAA is making. And for the first time, FEMA is our friend in this debate, which is astonishing. But these are decisions with sweeping ramifications, and thank God the three Tillamook County commissioners are as engaged as they are in these national level debates, because if we just paid attention to what was happening right in Tillamook, we wouldn't have the horsepower or the understanding to engage Washington, D.C. and tell them what you are doing is decimating Oregon. Exactly. Maybe you need to get the fire extinguisher out for me now.
Well, it's so frustrating because what happens with these, as you so very well know, and which I like to keep telling people, it isn't the voter that's going to decide this. It's an administrative rule. They're going to do what's best for us. It's very upsetting to me.
Well, it's patronizing, it's condescending, it's tone deaf. We don't need this administration and their aggressive, overstepping rules crippling our state economy as we're just beginning to rebound. And there isn't a single one of us, Shana, that gets up in the morning and says, gee, I'd like to wipe out species. Gee, I'd like to have dirty water. Gee, I'd like to have fouled land. Gee, I'd like to have filthy air. The fact that we have crippled our logging industry by assumptions, the fact that the backbone of our industries that was principally natural resource is crippled by regulations, and some of them are little and stupid and you can turn back easily, like that dumb debate about what to do with spent brewer's grain.
Yes.
I mean, that whole thing, that would have absolutely crippled the Pelican Pub, that the grain that you use to make beer and other malt beverages and in some cases distilled spirits, we used to be able to feed it to cows and chickens. Cows and chickens were happy. The brewers were happy. It kept that stuff out of landfills. And all of a sudden, here shows up the EPA and says, oh, no, this has to be handled like a food source. Well, the good news is Pelican Pub sent up a flag along with a bunch of others and said, you got to stop this. We managed to get Senator Wyden's attention, and Senator Wyden, now with his extremely powerful position, just called him up and said, this dog don't hunt. And we were able to bat that rule away.
Wonderful.
I'm not so sure that we will have the same success with NOAA, particularly when parts of NOAA are aided and abetted by, in my view, radical environmental interests that are going to make our economy on the coast stagger and in some places die.
Well, when they say the floodplain people, that means pretty much all the places that we live in Tillamook County.
Well, it was interesting, if you let me interrupt you. I was trying to make this graphic for Congressman Schrader, and they were explaining the different roads and all the rest of this, and I said, Kurt, picture, if you will, standing in downtown Tillamook, and you look south to the blimp hangars, and you look north to the cheese factory. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And his remark was, expletive that cannot be repeated on the radio. And all of a sudden, the magnitude of the impact was graphically portrayed for him. And he's going to help us. He is a good guy and a smart guy and a farmer. And he gets it. So he's going to help us. But I'm afraid that the bureaucracy might roll over even our own delegation.
Well, I want people to stay, and people will keep you on top of this, but there's some disinformation out there in my mind. But Betsy, I really appreciate you taking the time, and actually Tim visited a little bit about it, Tim Josie on Tuesday, of course Mark did on Monday. I'm glad that our people have got their eyes open and making sure that we have a voice at this table.
All three of our county commissioners are right on top of this. And with Tim's bully pulpit at the national level for NACO, the National Association of County Officials, and Mark's state standing on natural resource issues, and Bill's just steady connection and understanding with the farm community and people on the ground. We're lucky to have a powerful team of commissioners that care desperately about Tillamook County, and they are going to bat for us hard, and I'm going to do everything I can to help them.
Thank you, Betsy. Betsy, we're going to take another short break for a great sponsor. We'll be right back. We're visiting with our Senator Betsy Johnson, but Tillamook County, it's a beautiful part of the world with a rich history. And thanks to the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum, from the beauty of our shores to the preserved wonders of our past, our history is secure. Established in the 1930s, the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum was given the task of preserving and interpreting the environmental and human history of Tillamook County. What a wonderful job they're doing. The care they give the exhibits, you'll find a restored Victorian bedroom on the second floor of the museum. To the heart, they show our environment. Kilch's Point, a special place on Tillamook Bay, acres of forested wetlands, tidal marsh, open meadow. It is Tillamook. These acres are held in trust by the museum, protected for us all. The history of Tillamook County serves as a reminder of the diverse people who have called it home. This stretch of the North Oregon coast is a living memorial to those who came before. And that history is preserved, for all to enjoy at the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum. Open Tuesday through Sunday on 2nd and Pacific in downtown Tillamook. Step back in time with the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum. And this
Can I just
weekend...
say, I'm a member. I think I'm a member. If I'm not a member, Gary will hear this and I'll get my membership renewed. But I'm a donor and a visitor, and that is a fabulous museum.
I'm so impressed. I am impressed too, and Gary was on yesterday, and he always lets me go there. Our Kilchis Point Reserve, what has happened out there is just unbelievable over the last 4 years. From the young people from our youth authority, they're out there working on it. Have had inmates from South Fork. It's an unbelievable, and my son was here right after the Sunday after the fair, and I said, well, let's stop, Vince, you haven't seen it. Oh, all right, Mom. I don't really have time, but he walked all of it because once he was so intrigued, and this was a young man who knew the area, but had not yet walked that area.
Well, it's pretty spectacular, and Gary is doing a terrific job. My husband used to prowl the attic with Wayne Jensen. I actually have a kind of interesting personal connection to Tillamook County. My now husband was working for a helicopter company that was working up in the Burn. And John, my husband, always had a fascination with the Burn and was absolutely convinced that somewhere up there was this pristine train that had been untouched by the flames. And Wayne Jensen, bless his heart, was so generous in letting John pore over old maps. And back before I got into elected life, we used to go up and march around in the Burn, and the museum is such an excellent repository, and also having its wonderful connection with Senator Hatfield.
Exactly.
Which is a gift. A lot of museums of much greater size and scope would kill for the kind of things that Senator Hatfield, artifacts that Senator Hatfield helped direct towards the museum.
Well, we're lucky to have just another thing in Tillamook County. Now, Betsy, what else? Let's see. What's happening now?
Well, I'm actually AWOL right this second from a group of people that have gotten together to talk about how do we try to make our schools more secure. And this is in the face of potential active shooters in schools. What do we do between law enforcement, police, educators to try to make our schools a little bit more resilient and transparent in terms of their layout? We saw a presentation from a program that Washington State has that can bring up on a computer any kind of issue that is affecting a school, whether it would be a tsunami, whether it would be an incident where students would turn on their colleagues and faculty, whether it would be mudslide, whatever, and can bring up in real time the floor plans, the ingress and egress points, where to stage helicopters, medical helicopters or police helicopters if they came in, what the neighborhood looks like, where you could station reunification points where kids and parents got back together again. And so we're going to spend the lion's share of today talking about what are the elements that need to make our schools safer. I have long been a proponent of trying to put health professionals back into the schools. When you and I were in grade school, and I dare say high school, there was a school health nurse that was available to the kids. And those school health nurses provided a number of different services. There have been DARE officers that have been in schools to talk about drugs, but also to serve as positive role models. And I believe that if we had those kinds of professionals embedded in our schools again, that we would be able to identify those alienated, disaffected young, generally young adolescent boys, and try to get them the mental health intervention that they need. That would go so much further in terms of curbing, I believe, some of the bad behavior in schools, from bullying all the way up to the egregious acts of shootings. If we had the ability to earlier and more aggressively identify those kids that were struggling with mental health issues, and then the state were to provide a robust series of opportunities to get those kids treatment early on. And that, in my view, would go so much further than some of the knee-jerk reactions to, let's ban guns. Well, we're not going to be able to ban 500 million guns, many of which are acquired legally, but fall into the hands of mentally incompetent people who wouldn't ordinarily be identified. And so I'm hoping that out of this task force, maybe we can make some substantive recommendations to the legislature that would make school buildings and school kids safer.
Well, I absolutely agree. The present and it was interesting hearing Randy, our school superintendent, talk about it. Because on the one hand, you think, oh, it's Tillamook, we'll be fine. No, look, it wasn't that long ago. They're on the edge of Troutdale. Who saw that? Nobody saw that coming. It's terrible what can happen. And the fear of getting caught, sad to say, the fear of getting caught keeps them honest. So maybe just make a greater presence, a stronger presence makes a difference.
Well, and earlier intervention. And then the state, I think, has let our kids down badly. We lack the facilities that are designed to help adolescents, both adolescents in crisis, in mental illness or mental break crisis, as well as ongoing treatment. I'm not sure I'd want to be 14, 15, 16 again. When I look back on where we were in school, it seems like a kind of bucolic, sepia-toned time compared to the prevalence now of drugs and violence and really making schools an entirely different place than they were a million years ago when you and I were walking
Absolutely.
the halls.
I mean, I grew up going to school in Estacada, and I think the worst thing, maybe somebody, a tall senior would sit a freshman on top of the lockers or something like that, but it wasn't very scary back then.
Yeah, or somebody got pregnant and went to live with Aunt Somebody for a while.
There you go. The family took care of things.
Yeah, it was a whole different environment, and the drugs that were around then compared to what's happening now were pretty passive.
Exactly.
And I'll just say this about that. I find it fascinating for all of the people that are so worked up about genetically modified food that one of the reasons that the dope now, I'm told by people that are knowledgeable in these things, one of the reasons that the dope now is so powerful is
because it's been genetically modified. Is that what you're going to tell me, Betsy?
Because it's so highly genetically engineered. So let's see. I'm going to vote yes to have labeling on everything, and I'm going to vote yes to legalize the pot, but the pot is only Wowie Maui or Maui Wowie because it's been genetically engineered. I just find that
I know that there's something good. All right.
I find that an interesting little irony.
I have a feeling that's going to pass. I look at things. One of the things, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, one of the things, and I'm going to support it, is 90. I like that idea.
So am I. And the next time I'm on your show, I want to talk to you about the difference between the independent party of Oregon and non-affiliated. I think lots of people don't want to subscribe to the ideology of either the Republicans or the ideology of the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And so they go down and they say, I want to register independent. They don't know that they're getting sucked into a political party versus voting, registering non-affiliated, meaning a pox on all of you, I don't want to belong to any party. And as a result, they get sucked into a party that has just a little executive committee making all their rules. They won't accept write-ins on their ballot. They charge $600 to be considered, whether or not a candidate can even be considered by the party. And all that decision is concentrated in a handful of people. And I really think a lot of folks don't know about that, and that ballot measure 90 would help alleviate that problem, because in the primary, it would take all comers in the primary. You could be Constitution, Working Party, Republican, Democrat, Communist, whatever, Green, and the top two finishers move forward into the general. And there will be a lot of rhetoric about how this limits our choices. That's hogwash. It is the entrenched parties that are holding on to the last vestiges of their power in order to, in my view, manipulate the systems. I think 90 is a great idea.
We'll talk more about it as we roll on towards the election. Betsy, thanks for calling in.
Well, thank you for being so flexible in accommodating everybody's revolving schedules. Thank Mark again, and I'll look forward to the next time we're together.
I do too, Betsy. Tune in tomorrow. We'll be visiting with Marianne Ganger about Monday Musical Club season, which kicks off just this in September. But for now, thank you again, Betsy, and Tillamook, enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.